The Aggies added wide receiver Jordan Anthony via the transfer portal. What's his role going to look like?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in the Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Of course, today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Like I said, I hope everybody had an outstanding weekend, got to do some fun stuff. While we were weekending it up, the coaching staff did something I didn't think was possible. They found somebody who could beat me to the refrigerator. Yes, that is right. Wide receiver Jordan Anthony, potentially the fastest human being to ever walk the earth. Usain Bolt, watch out. All jokes aside, Jordan Anthony is a receiver with elite speed. Was once referred to as the fastest high schooler in the world coming out of high school. Of course, was a composite 4-star. 24/7 Sports didn't like him. They had him as a 3-star. He was listed as an athlete out of high school. Of course, played wide receiver once he got to Kentucky. Transfers, he had to the schools that reached out when he hit the portal: Tennessee, Mississippi State, Houston, Texas Tech, and the Aggies were able to get the job done. So the question is, what's his role going to be on this team? At first I watched some tape. There wasn't much tape last year at Kentucky. He only appeared in 2 games. So there wasn't a lot of tape last year from Kentucky. So I had to go back to some high school tape. A lot of times we see these elite speed receivers. Two guys that come to mind are one guy that comes to mind is John Ross, drafted to the Bengals because he at the time had the record for the 40-yard dash in the combine. I think that might still stand, but that's beside the point. Elite speed guy, continued to get hurt time and time again, never made any kind of name for his career. And we see that with speed guys a lot nowadays. A lot of guys that are known for just being fast. And the reason I think that is because these receivers that are just fast, are they receivers or are they track stars? You can't just be a track star. You can't just go routes past people. You have to be a good route runner. You have to do the small intangible things that make receivers who they are. So Jordan Anthony, his role, before we get to that, small guy, 5'9", 160. Actually, he was listed on Kentucky's roster at 156. So little guy, but he comes with 4 years eligibility. But when it comes to his role on this team, when he first committed, I thought, he's leaving a Kentucky team that has a solid wide receiver room, but isn't as good as the Aggies wide receiver room. So why is he coming here? I don't know what his role is going to be here. And then I watched the tape and I said, I think that Anthony is going to get the ball. He's going to get the rock some. Is it going to be I don't see him being a possession receiver. He's not going to be a guy who's out there every play. When you watch the tape, what immediately stands out to me is it is very Deebo Samuel-esque. Of course, former Gamecock, now with the 49ers, a guy who you just get the ball in their hands, whether it is a screenplay, whether it is just a 2-step and cut, or whether it's an end around. You get the ball in this guy's hands. And that's what I think the Aggies are going to do with Jordan Anthony. And I think Coach Petrino is going to have a field day with a guy with this kind of speed. He's just the speed, 60-meter dash, 6.55 seconds. I don't know much about track and field, but what I do know is that is that was record breaking during his time. So the speed is there. And then, so like I said, the question then for me was this: is he a receiver or is he a speed demon? And I just said that a minute ago. I watched the high school tape. He can play receiver. He is not just fast. And that was my concern. Like I said, the minute he committed, I said, okay, what do we have here? I watched the tape because, like I said, there wasn't much at Kentucky. I watched the high school tape. There were some plays where he'd run a post route or he would run some technically sound routes get open. He catches the ball well. He runs the crisp routes. He has a good catch radius. And like I said, he also just is flat out can run the routes that you want a guy of his speed to run, which is a post route, which is a go route, which is a bubble screen or little screens. You just have to find a way to get him in space and let him do his thing. So, like it's back to his role on this team. Do I think he's going to be a guy who's going to take over Musa Muhammad's spot or Evan Stewart's spot, Anaya Smith's spot, Noah Thomas's spot? No, I don't see that happening. But I do see him being a spark plug who can come in and have these massive chunk plays for the Aggies where you just feed him the football and say, run, go. And he's going to create plays with his legs. I mean, that speed, it's undeniable. I think it's safe to say he's the fastest player in college football. I don't know that for a fact. That's just an argument, but he's one of the best track stars in the world. So you put 2 and 2 together there. He's got to be, okay, we'll say this. He's a top 5 fastest player in college football. That I can confidently say. So I don't, like I said, I think the role is going to be getting him the ball and letting him work with space. Coach Petrino likes receivers like this. There really isn't one on this roster. Like Anaya Smith's a quick guy, a shifty player, a gadget guy who can do it all. But this isn't like the role that Anthony's going to play is going to be very different from how you would want to use Anaya Smith. So I like if I had to stake my claim to how many times Anthony touches the football or how many snaps. We won't say snaps. We'll say how many. I bet you he gets somewhere between like 15 and 30 targets this year. I think that's safe. And the reason I say that is because I think he's going to be a guy who comes into the game and touches the ball and for 2 plays and it's a screen play or it's a go ball where you're just trying to kind of get a spark. And I think he can provide it. But that's what's exciting about landing Anthony. I'm sure a lot of people, like I said, like I did at first, when Anthony committed, at first I was like, players like this guy never pan out. He's just fast. That's all he is. He's a fast guy. He doesn't have anything else to provide for this team. And I was incredibly wrong in thinking that because he can do the little things that wide receivers need to do to succeed in the SEC, to succeed in college football. And Anthony can do that. So, I think they can use him on end rounds. I think he can get some carries. I think the Deebo Samuel role for the 49ers, for those of you that are NFL fans, I think that is a good example of a role because they're similar players, shifty, elusive. They can make people miss, quick guys. Now, Anthony's faster than Deebo, but I mean, yeah, I can pretty confidently say that Anthony's faster than Deebo. But I think they have the similar skill set. Now, Deebo, the only difference there is that a guy like Deebo Samuel is, he's hard to bring down. He's more kind of built. Anthony is a smaller, kind of skinny guy. But I think what I'm getting at, I'm not really comparing the player. I'm more comparing the role. And I think that's a role we could see Anthony playing this year for the Aggies. And I think it's a good thing. I just think it makes this wide receiver room deeper. One thing I've harped on this whole time I've been doing this show for you all is depth and how key it is. The wide receiver room, it's elite in the top end, but depth is I mean, there's, it's just, there's not a lot of proven depth outside of the 4 guys that I listed a minute ago. So, they had a receiver, I think his name was like Tyron Smith, a kid from UTEP that committed, and he ended up leaving. He was the coaching staff wanted a guy like this, a speedy guy who can come and make a spark play. When they lost that kid from UTEP, I believe it was UTEP. They needed to replace that production or replace what that was. And then you got to go get a guy like Jordan Anthony, who isn't proven, but comes in with 4 years of eligibility and elite speed. I'm interested to see what you all think. I've seen some comments from the Friday's video, seeing some people excited about landing Anthony. I'm excited about it. I think he's going to guy that if you told me he had 3 touchdowns and 60+ yards this year, wouldn't surprise me in the least bit because he has the speed to just run around people that are some of the best athletes on the planet. So I think Anthony's going to be great, and I think he's going to make this football team deeper. I'm really excited to see the kind of production he puts on the field, and I'm also curious to hear your all's thoughts on this edition. So let me know in the comments. What do you think? And then that's a good question. How many receptions, targets do you think Anthony has this season for the Aggies? And do you think he's a guy who could be a staple in the wide receiver room in the future? Because I think there's a chance of that. The Aggies have a top 10 cornerback room in the country. We're going to talk about that, but first, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Or excuse me, sorry, they changed it up to $2,500. Think about that. Up to $2,500. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So right now, the NBA playoffs, it's 3-1. The Nuggets got a lead. I'm rooting for the Nuggets. I've said it before. I'm a Joker guy. I like Jokic. I don't have a reason for you. I just like him. He reminds me of me. You know, it's got to be a big bully ball. But hey, any Jimmy Butler fans that think the Heat might come back and get back in this thing? I mean, hey, Jimmy Butler did play under Coach Buzz Williams. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but if you do, no sweat first bet. Go put your money where your head's at. Put your money where your mouth's at. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Yeah, so you look at this, you look at this cornerback room, and we've talked about all of the additions the Aggies made in the transfer portal. You bring in a couple guys in this recruiting class, and you just have a couple guys left on the roster from last year. Cornerback and the secondary in general was a position where the Aggies lost some some serious dogs last year. So, you, of course, replace that with a guy like Tony Grimes, a guy like Sam McCall, a guy like Josh DeBerry. And so On Three has done a great job. I love these little articles. It's the top 10, this room, wide receiver room, tight end room, running back room, cornerback room, defensive line room. They've done a good job putting out those articles. And they currently have the Aggies at the number 10 cornerback room. I don't have any way to I'm not going to sit here and disagree with that statement in the least bit. I think this cornerback room is going to be great. Now, one stat, and we're going to get a little bit more into this here in a little bit, but the defense only had 4 interceptions last year. We're going to talk about our third segment today. We're going to be talking about a few statistics from last year that kind of need to improve for the Aggies to be better this year. But that's one of the stats. We'll talk about that more in depth in a minute. But I think that's a number of the 4 interceptions that can drastically improve by deepening up this cornerback room. You bring in this depth. Of course, you have Tyreek Chappell back. You bring in Tony Grimes, Sam McCall, Josh DeBerry, and then you have Bryce Anderson, who's likely to be playing nickel, back for another year in College Station. This is a deep, deep cornerback room that has lots of guys who have played at the Power 5 level, who have been there, done that, against some great competition, a couple of ACC transfers. Tony Grimes was a former 5-star recruit. There's some just deep talent in this cornerback room. So it doesn't surprise me in the least bit that the Aggies are currently ranked as the number 10 cornerback room in the country. It's not a shock to me because that's how good this room can be. And, now that we've broken down that number a little bit about the cornerback room being top 10, and I've talked about the cornerback room a lot. I'm excited about these guys. I think this is a deep room with elite talent. But, I've seen a lot of negativity. I see negativity about the Aggies all the time. I saw today, literally sliding on Twitter today, I saw it was a small podcast, a small college football podcast, and they did their season prediction giving the Aggies 5 wins. I don't buy it. I get it. I get the recency bias of how bad the team was last year. I understand people are frustrated. I understand people are fed up with every year the Aggies have this preseason hype and they don't live up to expectations. Well, this year's the polar opposite. This year, the Aggies are getting the preseason hate. But it's funny because not on their players. It's more on just the fact that, you have good players, but you're going to stink anyway. That's basically people's argument. That might happen. In all reality, that's what happened last year. You had a great team, roster-wise, and you didn't win that many games. You won 5 games. So, but then looking at this, top 10 wide receiver room, honorable mention defensive line, and a top 10 cornerback room according to On3. Not obviously in the SEC, we're talking the whole dang country. So that, like I said, top 10 cornerback room, a top 10 wide receiver room, and the defensive line was listed as an honorable mention. So you could say top 15 if you want to say it like that. But at the end of the day, I think that defensive line is going to prove to be better than top 15. I think that this defensive line is going to be one of the best in the country when it's all said and done. We talked about that on Friday, but the depth on this team is it's hard to even explain. So that's why, and I can sit here and defend the Aggies as much as possible and call me a sunshine pumper. That's fine. I understand it. I love pumping sunshine, but at the end of the day, I'm not pumping sunshine. I'm just telling my genuine beliefs on what this team can be. This says it all right here. A cornerback room, defensive line room, and wide receiver room. The Aggies have the best position, 3 of the best top, 10, 15 position groups in the country. The talent on this roster is some of the best in the country. Then you talk about the offense last year stunk. We're going to get into the statistics on that and talk about what can improve here in a minute. But part of what's going to change is you bring in Coach Petrino. I think people are underplaying that dynamic now. We've said it time and time again. I do think Coach Fisher's going to have to let Coach Petrino really take on the responsibility of the offensive coordinator. He needs to take his hands off the offense. And if he does that with this talent, Coach Petrino, as a proven elite play caller, one of the best minds on the offensive side of the ball in college football history, this team could do something special. I get it. Those that want to be down, I see some comments saying that the coaching staff is going to be fired after 6 games. Hey, all opinions are welcome here, and I appreciate them, but I will live and die by the fact that this team is going to succeed in 2023. This roster is too good. I think I'm a big believer in Coach Petrino. I know was off the field stuff, but that's not the conversation for this. For me, it's just the fact that I think he's a great coach. I think he's a great mind. He knows the game. So I know we started talking about this cornerback room and then moving into this topic, but it's just at the end of the day, I think this roster is too good to fail. And if I'm on the exposed takes or whatever on Twitter in 7 months, so be it. That's fine. But at the end of the day, I just believe how good this team can be if the coaching staff puts this Texas A&M 2023 roster in a position to succeed. If they do that, I will live and die once again by the fact that Texas A&M can win 9+ games this season. If that doesn't happen, this team could win 6 games. I can see that happening. It's an SEC schedule. It's not a cakewalk, but and I'm ready for the I told you so's. If this goes bad, I get it, and that's okay. If that happens, it happens. But the one thing I can sit here and back with proof is the talent on this team, and the Aggies have it. These lists from On3, which is a very well-respected publication talking about college sports, likes this team, likes this roster. Might not like the coaching staff, but likes this roster. If this roster succeeds, the Aggies are going to have a good season, and I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is on that because I'm high on the Aggies this year. I'm high on this team. I think Texas A&M is going to be elite in 2023, and I really hope I'm not wrong. What are some statistics that flat out just need to get better before next season? Last year, of course, the offense was, I don't know if there's really a word that I can say here to explain it. Well, you know what? I got one. It was really bad. Really, really awful. And statistically, that statement's backed up. 22.75 points per game behind only Kentucky. No knock to Kentucky, but that's not somewhere Texas A&M. I say this with all these schools, Texas with Kentucky and Vandy and Missouri. You don't want to be talking about statistics and saying you're barely ahead of Kentucky or barely behind Vandy or Missouri. That's not where you want to be with how good this team is, with how good this team was last year. These statistics are not where you want to be. 360 yards per game, which was, bottom barrel of the SEC. That wasn't at the very bottom, but not very high. One thing that is a little scary to me is that you had 1,695 rushing yards and A-Chain had 1,100 of those. Just because Amari Daniels, Le'Veon Moss, and Reuben Owens, the guy that are going to be toting the rock, are somewhat, not somewhat, they are unproven guys. They just don't have a ton of experience behind, A-Chain, who was your mainstay guy running the ball for the Aggies. So the running game is going to have to be able to succeed. And I'm high on that happening because I do think the offensive line is going to be better. And I also think that these running backs are going to be good. Do we have a Devon Achane on this roster? I don't know about that. I think Reuben Owens could turn into a guy who is a high draft pick in the NFL at some point, but he is still young, a true freshman. I think Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels are solid running backs, and I think they're going to have massive roles on this team. But I think the way Coach Petrino is going to do things, you have to kind of balance things out. It's going to be a whole bunch of guys, to get to 1,700 yards like last year. Can you have a 700-yard rusher and 2 500-yard rushers, or can we do better? Can we have an 1,000-yard rusher and 2 500-yard rushers? That things like that need to be the goal for this offense. And then kind of speaking to and once again, the Aggies 12th in total offense last year, which is just with that roster, guys like Stewart, and I know Nia Smith got hurt, but I mean, the offense, you had some injuries on the offensive line, but that team was too good to be the 12th best offense in the SEC. So these numbers are going to have to get better. And part of my argument from just a minute ago, talking about how good I think this team can be, I do think there are intangibles that could get in the way of this team's success. A little bit of it's coaching. A little bit of it is, like I said, is Jimbo going to let Coach Petrino let it be his offense? All of those things are going to be the question marks heading into this season. And they are going to lead to this team succeeding and being elite, or this team kind of just being okay. I don't see a world where this team is not at least okay, which, that's a relative word, whatever okay is to you. To me, it's like, I don't see a world where Texas A&M doesn't win 7 games. And if that blows up in my face, so be it. But I just, looking at the schedule, looking at the roster, I just don't see it. On the defense, these are two stats, because the defense last year was great. Against the run, there were some struggles at times, but still the defense was solid. Points per game wise, for the opposition, the numbers were good. The Aggies had, now the two numbers that need to get better. We talked about the interceptions, 4 interceptions a season ago and only 20 sacks, which 20 sacks wasn't worse in the SEC, but once again, it was kind of that bottom, 3 or 4 schools in the SEC. I see both of those numbers improving. I've talked about how high I am on this defensive line, how high I am on this edge rusher room. I think that the Aggies are going to make opposing quarterbacks' life's nightmares all game long. So I think that they shatter 20 sacks. I think that number gets shattered this year. I think it could be up. I think it could be some. I think the Aggies could have 30, maybe 30 sacks, maybe 30 sacks as a number I feel safe saying. I think they could do that this season. If it was like 25, I'd feel a little bit better about it. 27, but I think I'd almost guarantee the Aggies having more than 25 sacks this season. The interceptions. Now, I get the thing about interceptions is like the ball kind of falling in your hands, or, your defensive lineman, McKinley Jackson smacks the quarterback and the quarterback flings one high in the air and Tony Grimes picks it, stuff like that has to happen. You have to have the different, it's not always just like, oh, wow. It's more rare for a cornerback to make a great play on a ball to pick it off, which happens, of course. But I'm saying, like, a lot of times interceptions are unforced errors by the quarterback or the defensive lineman getting in their face and causing a bad throw, stuff like that. So it's not a number but I think this cornerback room as a whole is going to improve. As we just talked about, it's the number 10 room in the country, according to On3. So I could see a world where this number improves. And I mean, 4, that was not a high number compared to the rest of the SEC. So, and I think all that does, if I could teleport into the end of this season, and I came back and told everybody here that that the Aggies got 30 sacks and 8 interceptions, I think that just makes the team better as a whole. I mean, well, no duh, because like the turnovers usually equal good field possession. Not always. Usually you get this offense good field possession, they can hurt you. You give Coach Petrino and Wegman and this stable of running backs and this wide receiver room and the offensive line, you give them good field possession, they're going to go put points up on the board. So making these numbers better, I think these numbers being so low are part of the reason why the offense struggled last year. I know that the defense was still solid, but they didn't create a lot of turnovers. You create more turnovers, you pick a guy off on the 20-yard line. I mean, worst case scenario, you're going to boot a field goal and put up 3 points. So creating turnovers is going to lead to better offense for the Aggies this season, and I think we're going to see that happen. But as a whole, I mean, basically, to break this down, the statistics that have to get better are, I think the Aggies need to run for more yards this year. I think it's going to be more spread between all three of the guys we talked about. Last year was mostly just A-Chain, as we discussed also. And then I think the points per game has to go up significantly. I mean, the teams at the top of this, it was substantial, the difference between where Texas A&M was and where the Tennessees and Georgias of the world were on these numbers. So stuff's got to happen here. This has got to improve. But I think the talent's there. Basically, I mean, to break down my argument for why I'm excited about this team this year, it's simple as this. I think this roster is one of the best rosters in the country, and I think Coach Petrino is that big of a deal. Those are my two reasons for excitement around this team this year. And if that pans out, if that hits, I think this team can be awesome, and I'm really, really excited to find out. I think we're at like 83 days away from the start of the season, somewhere around there, 85, 82, something like that. So we're getting there, ladies and gentlemen. We are truly getting there. And I couldn't be more excited. Last thing I want to talk about here, I am thinking about starting to do like a little mailbag type of thing. If that's an idea you all like, let me know in the comments. But, just having something on like our third segment on Fridays, you all send me some questions and I'll answer some questions on our third segment on Friday. And I will workshop it, but let me know what you all think. And if you all would like to have some questions that you all see answered on the show, if you like that idea, and then once again, send me some questions and maybe we can start it this Friday. I think it's a fun idea because I love reading your all's comments, and a lot of times I bring them up, as you all know, but I'd love to have it be a full-on segment. So leave me some questions or some topics or whatever we should discuss, and we can maybe make that an ongoing thing going forward. As always, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Once again, I hope you had an outstanding weekend. Hope you have a great week. And that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. We will see you tomorrow.